The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, host of The People's View, sponsored by the Nashua City Republican Committee. And if you want, we meet at the Crown Plaza the second Thursday of every month. And if you want to find out more information, you can go to our website at nashuagop.org.
Welcome to The People's View.
Hello, and help me welcome Don Whalen. Don, you're from Ward 7.
That's
and
correct.
You're running for legislature the first time.
Absolutely.
How did you come about that decision?
So it was a long decision, actually. It took me about a year to determine if I had the time. I have 2 young kids who are active in sports and school. And gave it a lot of thought, talked to a lot of people, and then I decided I'm going to make it work. I'll put the time into it. And I think that's the biggest thing, the time commitment. I'm out knocking on doors, putting up signs, and meeting folks in Ward 7.
Well, that's the campaign is kind of tough. You got a lot of people to see, and you're new to it, so people have to know who you are. And that's why we're having this interview.
And that's one of the biggest things I've noted in talking to all the folks. They said just getting your name out there seems to be the hardest part. And it really does make a difference because you're coming out of nowhere, and then people have to decide if they want to vote for you or not. So, yeah, really, name recognition is really important, especially for someone running first time.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, why you feel you're qualified to do this, and why you're doing it.
So I think I'm very good at solving problems, actually. And I have a full-time job. I work for a small startup software company, and we apply our software solutions to problems that customers have. They come to us, they have something that they need to solve, and we take our software and apply it to that. So I see lots of problems in the business world, and there's clearly problems in the political world as well. So I thought, well, why not take this problem-solving skill and apply it to the government arena and hope to come in and think differently around what are ways to solve issues and come up with creative solutions.
I think that's what was needed up there. We've had a number of Republicans running way back in 2010, and most of them came from the business world, where you're hitting problems, you have a mechanism by which you solve them, that the normal employee up in the administration doesn't have that skill. There are some that do, but not as many as we should have. And I think we have to work through those problems and help the administration solve them.
Absolutely. Another thing I've noticed is communication to the people in Ward 7 could be better. I've talked to a lot of folks, and just understanding the whole process. Some people thought there was only 1 seat available in Ward 7.
Yeah.
So just discussing that, explaining with folks, there's 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans running, and there's only 3 seats up at the general election. So educating folks as well as I talk to them.
That's right.
Walking
That's
around,
right.
knocking on doors.
Well, what do you find the most of the problems around? What the people feel that needs to be done in the state?
Well, it's interesting you ask that. I have on my phone, it says, the most dangerous phrase in our language is, we've always done it this way. And I feel like that can get you in a dangerous place.
Definitely.
So doing things the same way and not having a different result. So I feel like coming in and taking a different approach, looking at things differently, and creatively thinking around what are better ways to solve it. Adding new taxes shouldn't be the answer every time.
Right.
So smaller government is a good thing. We don't need the government in our lives as much. So I think coming in with New Hampshire, it's still an environment in which you can make a big change. Absolutely.
I think you're right, and I think we have to keep after the people because, as I told you, in 2011 and 12, we had a lot of business-like approaches to some of the state's problems, and we had a path forward, but unfortunately in 2012, the election brought more of the people back, and everything sort of stopped. Programs that we were developing, like having a one-stop shop for anybody who is starting or expanding a business to go to, to be able to find out what they had to do in order to accomplish their goals. It's just stopped, and it hasn't been implemented. And Canada's had it for over 6 years.
Right.
So anyway, you got something to look forward to when you get up there.
Absolutely. And I think the goal is we do need to be careful and mindful of folks who are out working hard and paying taxes and not spending in an irresponsible way. I think
right.
responsible spending, look closely at what is needed, review things that are in place. Are they working? And if they're not, change them or eliminate them. So I think those are the kinds of things we need to look at. And I feel like I can get up there and make an impact.
I think you will. One of the things that we're going to be facing right away is the budget. And if you saw anything in the newspaper that there are things that are coming out, that the first draft of the budget for the administration is the same as was proposed 2 years ago. And we're going to face a $1 billion increase.
Right.
And taxes and new taxes over $100 million just to support this approach that they're taking. I think what's going to happen if we have our majority is the same thing that we just ignored the governor's proposal and went out and put together a darn good budget, which obviously showed a little bit of an increase in the income, but without increasing the tax rates.
Right, I think that's key.
The economy is starting to pick up, and we got to keep that going.
And that goes back to what I said about doing it the same way.
That's right.
It's still $1 billion, and it's
That's
2
right.
years later. Not a lot of creative thinking there, just taking the same thing and moving it 2 years forward.
That's all I did. And I think you'll find that there's lots of opportunities to go in there and help them realize the mistakes they're making on that kind of a
Absolutely. And
budget.
taking a different approach
Yeah.
on how things are done.
What other things that you think have to be changed or implemented? Do you have any ideas along that line?
Absolutely. So obviously in New Hampshire, no sales tax, no state income tax. I grew up in Connecticut where there was no state income tax for a long time. And then one of the governors, you get to a certain tipping point where you can't make up the difference because all these programs are very expensive. And then they implemented an income tax. So I think these are the things.
Quickly.
That's exactly right. So, and unfortunately, not using Connecticut as an example, but they're chasing businesses out. GE, for example, decided to leave Connecticut. So you need to foster a business environment that lets people come in and create business. Keep that entrepreneurial spirit alive, because that does keep people employed. And we do have a low unemployment rate, but I think we can improve the business, that culture around that, and allow people to start businesses and grow their business and keep it here in New Hampshire.
And maybe keep a lot more graduates from our educational system here, staying here and not going outside the state for their jobs.
Absolutely. And look at all the folks that commute down to Boston. When we could foster a business environment here that would keep people here. And I think when I moved to New Hampshire about 13 years ago, my wife is from here, and we decided this is the best place to raise a family. And we have 2 young children, and it's just a great experience being here.
I agree with you. I moved up here from New Hampshire, from Massachusetts, and it's much better.
It is,
here.
absolutely. It's a little slower paced, and I've always liked New Hampshire, and there's
so
many
much here,
things to do.
I mean, to enjoy your family life.
Absolutely.
I think it is a good place to bring your kids up.
Absolutely.
My kids grew up a long time ago, but they're still around here.
That's great.
And yeah, so all except one who just moved to Kentucky.
It's a little warmer there, at least.
But anyway, yeah, do you have any idea of what committee you'd like to be on yet? Have you looked into
So
that?
being in the technology industry, I've talked to a couple folks in that, I think it's called the science, technology, and energy. That would probably be a good fit for me, because I have been in the software industry for a long time and stuck with technology, because it is interesting and it does change a lot. And it does allow you to take a different approach in looking at things and keeping up with what's going on because the technology does change. So that would be a great committee. I kind of have my eye on that.
Okay.
If I can get the folks of the people of Ward 7 to vote for me, I would
Okay.
definitely like to pursue that.
Well, are you looking to solve things on software or develop something about the technology? Or would you think that with your background, you might be able to help the administration function better?
Sure, that's one thing. And I had a professor a long time ago tell me, he said, don't apply technology to a problem just because it's technology. Make sure it's the right fit. And he always said, if a pen and a stack of note cards will do the trick, then you use the pen and the stack of note cards. Don't spend a ton of money trying to fit this round peg into a square hole. But I think that's common sense. But a lot of times folks say, well, we have money to spend, let's take this money. And it may not be a good fit for the problem. And sure, I've worked with the government a lot. I worked for IBM for a number of years, and I worked closely with the federal government, as well as the state and local level. And I saw a lot of inefficiencies and things that could be better, could be fixed. So is technology always the answer? No, it's not. But you can
Sometimes
streamline things. Exactly. When it
Sometimes
makes
it's
sense,
just,
then absolutely.
Well, I'll use one example that happened, and I go back to the 2011-12, where the Department of Justice wanted some extra money to do some things, and it was almost like the legislature had to bribe them to do something else that they wanted, that were reluctant. They had little call centers in each of the counties.
Right.
Okay, we wanted to make a center, call center, and they resisted, but they said, all right, we'll try it. And they were surprised at how well that worked. Instead of having 10 different places to call, you call one area, you have what wound up to be half the staff that was being used previously, and they were communicating about their different ways of doing things until they made a common way for all 10 centers, all 10 counties. And it's working wonderfully now. Now, if we can get people to think of new ways of doing things that way, and maybe your experience would help them understand that we are in a digital world, and we can do things a little faster that way in a lot of areas, because people are still using paper forms going back and forth, for example, in applications for permits and stuff like that, when you can do it on a computer a lot easier.
Absolutely. And that can streamline the workflow, save time and money doing it that way. And that's where sometimes a lot of folks aren't necessarily comfortable with technology. And understanding how you can apply that to some problems and issues. How do you streamline things? Save time and money. And it doesn't always have to be a huge impact initially. Incrementally over time, that can save as well.
Yeah. So you do have that kind of a problem area, I think, that your background would be very helpful in some of the policy committees, whether it's science and technology or the administration or even some other areas. I have a background in science too, and I applied for that first, and I got put on the Public Works Committee, which I find very, very interesting, and I still can apply the process, my thinking process, to their problems. And I think that's one thing they bring to the area if you don't get what you want, because I haven't, I've been on that committee now for this will be the 4th term if I get reelected.
And that's it. That may not have been your first choice, but you have a fresh viewpoint on something that's been ongoing for a long time, and you can take a different approach or a look at how things are being done. So I think that's another opportunity if you do get on something that you weren't necessarily had your sights on.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you'll get to meet a lot of people from the different organizations that really are doing some of the work outside of the administration. They're contracted out. You find out how that's working too. Because one of the things I found lacking is the ability to have these vendors, if you will, work together. They're there, they think they have to operate independently. But to service the state, it might be better if they have a little bit of communication within them and all work more effectively.
Exactly. And sometimes they look at a specific problem, but if you zoom out and look at the broader problem, maybe a single solution doesn't necessarily always work outside of that area, but there might be something that is a better fit. So I think, and that happens a lot, we see it where you focus on something very specifically, and we work with very large companies, some of the largest in the world, and they have their department or division that's focusing on it. But we always say, zoom out, take a look at how this solution can affect or impact other areas, which becomes a cost savings because you can apply it across the board instead of specifically. So I think it's just taking a look at it in a different way. And I think an outside viewpoint is good.
Well, I think that'll be called upon if you get up there. What else do you think about, from the standpoint of the people you've talked to, how concerned are they with the heroin epidemic?
Oh, that's a tough one because, yeah, and that's come up a lot in knocking on doors where there's people concerned. I mean, it's just every time you turn on the news or open the newspaper or look online, there's another story. And it's, for such a small population that New Hampshire has, it's rampant. And it really is terrible. And I know there's different scenarios on how people get to that point, whether they started on, they had an accident, they were on a prescription medication, and then they switched to heroin because it's cheaper, or they take another route to get there. But the bottom line is, it's an inexpensive drug that people can get a hold of relatively easily. And it's not one of those ones you can get off of by yourself typically. So it's not that you can't do it that way, but people need help. And it really is, the allure of it is, it's amazing, but it's unfortunate in so many cases. So many awful stories of mother and father and the children in the house, and they've overdosed, and you see them all the time. It's tragic, really. It is tragic.
I think that this is another area where we have to look at the overall situation, because we can't forget, while we have to treat some of these people right away, we can't forget to educate them so that they avoid it in the beginning and treat them afterwards if they are cured, to make sure they don't have a relapse. So that's the broader part of spending your money.
Absolutely, and that zoom out and take a look at it from a different perspective. Absolutely.
And I think, I don't know if you've had a chance to meet the people at Harbor Homes at all here in the city. They've taken a very broad picture of that, and they're helping some nonprofit organizations coordinate their efforts so that they work together over this broad spectrum of treating the patient or treating the potential patient.
Right, and that's right there is a good example of where a little communication and coordination can go a long way.
That's right.
So if you can share an effort in certain areas, that really can help save time and money, and then you get to know other organizations and you can work together on things going forward.
I think that, that to expand it too, looking at our problem with HHS, which is taking almost half of our budget,
That's right.
they are getting, I think, a little bit too big. There may be some way of organizing it more effectively, where you get more of this cooperation.
Absolutely.
They have, I forget how many contracts with nonprofit organizations, but it must be really terrific to try to coordinate that. And we do have a person, Don LeBrun in Ward 5, who is vice chair of that committee. And it's something where we have an opportunity to working amongst ourselves here in Nashua to maybe suggest what kind of solution that HHS could look at now that they have a new person, administrative head.
Absolutely, and that does seem to be, and that is a huge portion of the budget.
Right.
It does seem to be growing.
Right.
And that's where one of those things that can grow out of control rather quickly, even though the average person may not see it, that spending and amount of money that goes in can really start to spiral out of control.
One of the problems I understand from my perspective, and I don't get involved that deeply with it, is maybe your background in computer operation might help. They have people within the department that really can't communicate. They're isolated from one another. And I'm sure you've run into that.
Well, I'm smiling, but we see that all the time,
Yeah.
where for whatever reason, they're segmented in their own area. And opening those lines of communications is huge. And in that case, technology can be a good thing to really open that up and streamline processes and make things better.
Just to bring this out a little bit further, they still haven't resolved how much they spent in fiscal 16, which ended June 30th. And they were supposed to, by law, have their numbers all together by the beginning of September.
Exactly.
And what happens? We know that they overspent the budget, but we don't know by how much.
Right. Where's the checks and balances
That's
there?
right. That's right. And that's what we have to, I think, help the administration with. And I think if we get a Republican governor in there, we will be able to do things much more promptly, a person with a business background.
Absolutely. That does help.
Yeah. Do you have any other issues like Veterans Affairs or?
Well, that's actually on my door hanger
Is it?
around veterans. And you drive around town and you see homeless vets, and it's really, it's heartbreaking.
It is.
Because I'm very thankful and grateful for the freedoms we have in this country and for those folks who have fought in wars and been deployed all over the world. My grandfather was in World War I, got a Purple Heart, and I've always had a special place in my heart for military veterans. Two of my brother-in-laws are Marines or former Marines, and just there's something about the way they're treated. I feel it's not right. It really isn't right, and that something can be done about that. And I'm always very patriotic, but I'm thankful that I was born in this country. I think a lot of people have traveled extensively, and I've seen a lot of things and realize how good it is here. Sure, it's not perfect, and if anyone tells you that, they're probably crazy, but there's a lot that we have here that to be thankful for.
Definitely.
And it is a great country, and New Hampshire in particular is a great state. And I'd like to help keep it that way and
Help
keep
develop and get a
Absolutely.
little bit even better from that standpoint.
Exactly.
The economy, I think people don't realize if you have a good economy and growing, more income comes in from the same tax rates and everything that they pay, because you have more people employed. You have more things going, more sales going on.
Right, people are downtown eating out at the restaurants, shopping locally, using local services. I think that's all important. And I think a thriving economy and helping remove some of the things that make it hard to start a business or grow a business even. I think there's a lot of businesses who would like to grow, but maybe the people aren't staying here. They're moving to Massachusetts or commuting to Massachusetts. So I feel like the business environment could be stronger. And
What about the education environment? What do you think about that?
That's a good question. So I'm not a big fan of Common Core. I still think it's extremely unproven, and it was kind of pushed down to everyone. And I feel like that needs to really be closely looked at. And I don't think that it's necessarily working. So I'm not an expert on education, although years ago I did teach college for a year, and to just really see how that is. I haven't taught at the educational elementary or middle school or high school level, but I feel like that needs to be looked at. I don't know if this is something we should be pushing down.
More local control?
I believe that. I absolutely believe that. And I feel like that's one thing about the federal government, trying to take more control. And the 10th Amendment of the U.S. states specifically leave the states in control. So I think things should be done more at the local level than they are at the federal level. And Common Core and education is a big one, because a lot of money is spent on that. And I think it's broken, really, and I think it could be fixed.
I think that's one of the things that I have on my issues, too, is that we need to control the state education department. We can't let them demand everything, follow lockstep, because a lot of times, and I think the charter schools, especially the ones here in the Nashua area, are doing a great job for their people.
Absolutely.
And I think we ought to support that. But it is difficult when directions come down and they may say it's an option, but if you don't do it, you don't get any money.
Right,
the
and
state.
sometimes people don't look closely at what's being pushed down.
That's right.
And then there's money tied to it, so people tend to go along with that. So
Well, and the problem I have with a lot of the money that goes out, too, is they don't really set definite objectives, monitor the objectives. You know how to run a business project, and you have to monitor what's going on.
Absolutely.
And any changes you make, you have to make sure that they're headed in the right direction, and
Right.
things like that. And again, that's the business perspective, but it applies to a lot of things in life.
Agreed. And taking a business approach to things, we deal with customers, and our goal is to serve the customer.
Right.
And in this case, in politics, our goal would be to serve, my goal would be to serve the people of Ward 7 and have an open communication channel. And I think that's important. Not only having the ability for people in Ward 7 to contact me, but also letting them know what's happening in Concord.
What is the method that you're using? Do you have a website or just have a phone call?
I do have a website. I have my phone numbers on. I put my phone number on everything. I'm on Facebook, so a lot of things going through that. And so I'm taking a different approach of really getting out, knocking on doors. I think that's the biggest thing.
Okay.
You can do as much
That's right.
online stuff as you want, but
Right.
I'm out putting up signs, knocking on doors, meeting people, and then getting feedback.
And getting people to know you.
That's exactly right. And that's,
What-
as I mentioned
because
earlier.
they're really electing somebody who has the common objectives that they do, you know? And that's where you have to get out and really tell them what you are.
And just yesterday at lunch, I went and met a gentleman, and he looked at the back of my door hanger, and he said, "This is exactly what I believe." And he said, "You could put a sign in my front yard." I said,
There
"Well,
you
thank
go.
you very much." So, yeah, I think that's super helpful, but you don't get that feedback if you don't go out and knock
That's
on
right,
doors.
yeah.
It's great.
But then you get to be known, so I think you're going to head down the right path.
Absolutely.
What
I'm
you're
going to
doing
try my
now.
hardest.
Well, good luck on that. And do you have anything you want people to know before we end this interview?
Well, I've just asked the people of Ward 7 for their vote, and that's what I ask when I knock on people's doors.
Okay, very
So
good.
That's fantastic.
Well, very good. Good luck.
Thank you,
We'll
Carl.
hope
I
to see you up
appreciate
there
it.
in Concord.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Thanks.
Good, thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.